The terrorist criminal factions and organizations are living in hell on the continent after 17 nations from the Western Hemisphere sat down at the same security table with the United States to tighten the grip on cartels, block trafficking routes, share intelligence, and cut off the lifeblood of organizations that have grown for years. This Tuesday, June 9, 2026, this shift is already linked to a larger political change in the Americas. Peru is experiencing a very tight election between Keiko Fujimori and Roberto Sanchez. Chile has already chosen José Antonio Casti in a strong shift to the right. Bolivia has ended almost 2 decades of mass dominance. Honduras put Nasri Asfura in power after a close contest. Costa Rica elected Laura Fernandez on a tough promise to fight organized crime. And that's where the Shield of the Americas comes in as a response to the chaos that has taken over the region. Trump's message is simple. A cartel is not a social movement, drug trafficking is not a minor problem, and an abandoned border becomes an invitation for criminals, smugglers, and foreign influence. At the same time, the cutting of programs linked to the old US foreign aid machine became political fuel for those who accused the globalist left of supporting bureaucracies that never solved people's real problems. What has changed on the continent? Why has crime become a central target? How did 17 nations join this crackdown? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The Americas Conference Against the Cartels brought together defense and security officials in Doral, Florida, within the area of the United States Southern Command. There, representatives from 17 nations signed a joint declaration to strengthen security, sovereignty, and stability in the Western Hemisphere. The agenda was not hidden in diplomatic language. The focus was organized crime, drug trafficking, cartels, illegal routes, and the pressure from groups that cross borders using money, weapons, drugs, and migration as tools of power. Pete Hegseth framed the issue as a direct threat to the region. The proposal involves expanding operational cooperation, sharing information, strengthening and turning the fight against cartels into a security priority. The Southern Command also said the coalition aims to deter narco-terrorist networks. Later, Chile joined as the 18th member, and Ecuador was identified as the first nation to carry out joint ground actions against structures linked to cartels. This shows that the plan moved beyond the meeting and began targeting logistics, bases, and criminal command. Trump had been preparing this change since January 2025, when he signed an executive order to pave the way for classifying international cartels and other organizations as terrorists. The decision changes the weight of the problem. A cartel is no longer treated just as a local gang and starts to be seen as a transnational threat. The impact reached Brazil when the United States announced the designation of Primeiro Comando da Capital and Comando Vermelho as foreign terrorist organizations, effective June 5. Members of Lula's government expressed concern about the impact on police cooperation and the risk of external pressure. Chico Lucas, the National Secretary of Public Security, said that Brazil would not accept foreign intervention. André Rodrigues, the Director General of the Federal Police, called the decision political and advocated for more cooperation. The response struck a nerve. Brazilian factions are no longer seen by Washington as just an internal problem. The discomfort in Brasilia has a reason. The Primeiro Comando da Capital and the Comando Vermelho have grown beyond the traditional boundaries of urban crime. When an organization operates as a network, isolated efforts to fight it become weak. The Shield of the Americas was created precisely to close this gap between one border and another. Illegal migration has also become central to the debate because the caravans have paved the way for smugglers, extortion, and human exploitation. During the Biden's lax border years, many Latin American communities also paid the price. Small towns saw uncontrolled influx, pressure on public services, fear, and criminal groups charging for passage. The humanitarian rhetoric tried to cover up the problem, but ordinary people saw the mess up close. That exhaustion turned into votes. In Chile, José Antonio Casti won the second round in December 2025 with 58 points. Driven by fear of crime and demands for stronger borders, he promised to deport illegal migrants and strengthen security. In Bolivia, Rodrigo Paz Pereira won in October 2025, marking the end of almost 2 decades of mass dominance at the center of the presidential race. The economic crisis, the lack of dollars, and the fuel shortage shattered the narrative of stability. The region began to vote against the ideological promise that failed to deliver order. Honduras and Costa Rica complete this picture. In Riasfura, the conservative supported by Trump was declared the winner after a tight election in Honduras, with a promise to strengthen ties with Washington. In Costa Rica, Laura Fernandez declared victory in February 2026 after a campaign marked by security and the fight against organized crime. When even Costa Rica votes looking at violence and drug trafficking, it's clear that the problem is no longer an exception. Peru appears as the most recent piece on this board. Keiko Fujimori and Roberto Sanchez are running in an election that is practically tied. With 94% of the ballots counted, Sanchez had 50.15% and Keiko had 49.985%. The Electoral Authority called for responsibility as the counting continued. The contest exposes a nation tired of instability, corruption, weak governments, and the rise of crime. The next president will be the ninth in 10 years, a harsh portrait of institutional erosion. The former USAID appears in this story as a symbol of the machine that conservatives accuse of funding progressive agendas outside the United States. The Trump administration deeply cut foreign aid programs and began dismantling the agency, transferring what remained to the State Department. The right-wing interpretation is that when this funding dried up, groups aligned with globalism lost influence. You can't explain all elections by a single cause, but the coincidence became political ammunition. Less foreign money, more internal pressure, more votes for order, borders, and sovereignty. Marco Rubio also became an important figure in this shift. As Secretary of State, he maintained the approach of treating cartels as a direct threat to the United States and regional partners. China enters this clash because the Shield of the Americas also targets foreign influence in the Western Hemisphere. Washington accuses Beijing of playing a central role in the production of chemical precursors used in synthetic drugs, as well as expanding its presence in ports, infrastructure, and strategic areas. For Trump, cartel, fentanyl, money laundering, and Chinese expansion are all part of the same struggle for regional control. The plan is to close the door to crime and to powers that use chaos as an opportunity. Organized crime now faces a different kind of pressure. Before, many networks used to hide in the gap between one border and another. Now the proposal is to combine intelligence, track the money, close routes, and hold governments accountable. The criminal stops dealing with isolated actions and starts facing a coalition. The population of the Americas seems to have understood before much of the political elite that sovereignty without control is just empty talk. A border without oversight becomes a corridor. A government that hesitates in the face of a faction loses authority. Trump bet on this interpretation. And he found allies in a region tired of insecurity, uncontrolled migration, and ideological promises that did not deliver peace. The Shield of the Americas emerges at this breaking point, with 17 nations acknowledging that cartels are fought with cooperation, pressure, and political courage. Milson Alves, internationalist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to engage more with the Milson Alves community.